Have you ever felt that you were confused with terms that your fellow co-workers use in the medical device industry? You're not alone. In this video, I'll cover some key terms connected to design control, such as the intended use and how to get it right, user needs and design input, and design verification and design validation. Hi, I'm Peter Sibelius, the founder of medicaldevicehq.com. This video comes from my online course, Design Control for Medical Devices, available on medicaldevicehq.com. Click the subscribe button and notification button so you don't miss out on more useful content relating to medical device product development. So let's get started. This video is about speaking design control-ish. Now that might sound odd, but understanding the industry-specific language and terminology that you work with is a very important thing. If you have a few years of work experience from other industries before starting with medical devices, you're likely to discover that medical device product development is not fundamentally different from what you have been seeing before. In fact, many concepts are the same, but what is most likely different would be two things. One, that we use different terms and names for things, and two, we're absolutely obsessed with risk management and safety. In my experience, getting the medical device terminology right will help you a long way in understanding your colleagues and understanding your company's quality procedures. And these two things together should make life, or at least your work life, easier and make you more productive. So in this part, I will be laying the foundation for you for the rest of the course by bringing you up to speed on some of these key terms that are used a lot. We will not be covering every term in detail, but this is just an introduction so that you understand enough to follow along in the parts coming after this lesson, which will be more in-depth. When we looked at the project process earlier, we said that one important part of the scope was to determine the intended use. Let's look at what intended use means. Let's start with an example to let you know what I'm talking about. This is an intended use for a thermometer. The thermoscan thermometer is indicated for intermittent measurement and monitoring of human body temperature for people of all ages. It is intended for household use only. Now, I know you might not participate in defining the intended use for the medical devices you work with, or you don't see the intended use statement that often, but it is a very important concept. The intended use will have an impact on, for example, risk management, usability engineering, reimbursement, and if your medical device needs a clinical investigation or not to get regulatory approvals. In the US, the intended use can decide if the product will be cleared under a 510(k) or require a long and expensive pre-market approval process, which makes a world of difference, both time-wise and cost-wise. In short, you can say that the intended use is a short, high-level description of user profile, what indications the device is intended for, patient group, and other relevant conditions of use as intended by you, the manufacturer. And the intended use will determine also what you can say about the benefits of your product to your potential customers. Now, these are not small, insignificant things, so make sure the intended use is written and selected with great care. Another thing which is important to remember is that the intended use should be defined by you, the medical device manufacturer. And another important thing to note is that intended use is not only a paragraph in the instructions for use, it includes other communication channels as well. For example, what your sales reps are saying about your medical device and what you can say in your advertising. All these things must be aligned. Now, one way to come up with an intended use is to answer questions like who will be using the device, on whom, for what, where, and sometimes even when. And if you answer these questions in a few sentences, then you will have defined your intended use. Not all intended uses will be fully defined and answer all these questions, but if you do answer them all, you should have a good idea of your intended use. When you define what the device is to be used for, it will sometimes include the medical indication. Please note that if you make any statements about the device's efficacy or anything else for that matter, you'll have to have proof that what you say is objectively true. For example, if you claim that you have the cure for cancer, you'll have to prove that you do. We'll be coming back to this principle later on. By the way, intended use is synonymous with intended purpose, which you will find if you read the Medical Device Directive or Medical Device Regulation. But indications for use is a more narrow concept that focuses on the for what from before. That is the medical indication that the device is intended to be used for. The intended use can be changed over time, both during design and development as well as after release of the product to market. Just remember, if it is changed, particularly after release to market, make sure you run the change through your change control process so that you can identify the impact on, for example, documentation and regulatory approvals. Just changing a word or two could result in you having to do extensive clinical investigations. Now that was all on the intended use. You could see the intended use as a top-level requirement on your medical device. Then comes user needs, which would be the next level with some more detail than the intended use. User needs were also mentioned as part of defining the scope together with design input. I will now be putting these terms and a few more into a context. Please note, this is just the introduction to get the terminology in place on a basic level. We will be coming back to all these areas again during the rest of the course. Now, the intended use was the statement on who will use the product for what and so on. User needs should be based on the intended use, which I think makes perfect sense. We have used a simple example for a user need, which is that the system should be portable. That user need is then translated into a design input, which is an abstract technical requirement. In this case, we have said that to us, portable means that the weight should not exceed 10 kilograms. Someone else might arrive at another weight, and that might be true for that particular case. We simply do our best to come up with the abstract requirements that will solve or make the product work for the user according to their user needs. The regulatory requirements does not say who should come up with user needs and design inputs, but many times the people who are competent to define user needs are found in the marketing department or typically work with product management. Since the design inputs should be technical in their nature, they are usually established by engineering and should use engineering language. When we have designed a product, one should check that the design or product you came up with actually meet the requirements you set up at the beginning. This is a general principle in product development. In the medical device industry, it's a regulatory requirement to do just that. If we use design control terminology, we call this design verification and say that we need to confirm that design output meets design input requirements. In this case, our technical requirement was that the device weight should not exceed 10 kilograms. The verification could be done by putting the device on a calibrated scale and weighing it. A lot of people will think that verification is testing, but it could be using other methods as well, like reviews, demonstrations, or analysis to show that the requirements have been met. For example, if you state that the expected service life of the medical device is 10 years, you will most likely not show that this is true by using a medical device for 10 years and checking that it still works. No, you might be doing a careful engineering analysis of the materials and components included and maybe combine it with some accelerated tests to draw the conclusion on what the expected service life is. There are many different ways to show that a requirement has been met. When we have verified that the product meets the technical requirements, we also have to check that the device meets the intended use and user needs. Because remember, a product may be 100% technically correct, but still useless in a real setting. To avoid that, we should perform design validation. It is a regulatory requirement to perform design validation, and it must be done by testing your device design in a real or simulated environment. When you do, you have to use production units or equivalent devices. Doing that does not only make perfect sense, it is a regulatory requirement to do so. Looking at our example from before with the portable product, we might let a few users carry the device and thereby concluding that yes, the device is in fact portable. It is of course not always that easy to do design validation. Sometimes you cannot show that intended use and user needs have been met with anything less than a clinical investigation and use on real human subjects. Now please note that if you now feel a really strong desire to look up user needs and design input that I've just talked about, you will find them in QSR, or the Quality System Regulation, which you can easily find and download from the internet. But if you look into the ISO 13485, the European standard, or the EN ISO 13485, there is no mention of user needs and design inputs.
They are jointly referred to as design and development inputs. I'm just bringing it up so you don't get confused.
Did you like this video? Why not doing your network a favor by sharing this YouTube video to your LinkedIn network? People might thank you for it. And speaking of LinkedIn, do follow Medical Device HQ on LinkedIn. There is a link to our company page in the description below. Want to learn more about design control? Head over to medicaldevicehq.com and sign up for my online course on design control, which contains much more in-depth information and examples on the topics just covered. You'll find the link in the video description down below. If you think this video helped you understand design control-ish better, share this video. Do you have any questions? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Goodbye until the next video.